How's everybody doing?
We good.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. It's so good to see everyone. We want to thank you for joining us for our mental health ministry conversation. Um, we want everybody that's watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. If you all can go ahead and share the post, we would be extremely appreciative. Again, if you all go ahead and share the post, we would be extremely, extremely appreciative. I now want to place our conversation this month in the hands of one of our newest co-coordinator of our mental health ministry, uh, Brother John Parker. John, it's on you.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Hope everyone's doing well. I'm a little nervous, haven't done this in a while, especially in the Zoom format. Do you want me to share my screen for the slides, or how do y'all?
Either way, I can do it or you can do it.
Okay. Let me see. It might be easy if I do it. Let me see what I got here. I got 1,000 screens open. Okay. Yeah, if you have it pulled up, maybe it'd be easier for you. It'd be less for me to have to
I'll
navigate.
go ahead and get it.
Okay. So while Pastor Ross is doing that, just today's topic, I kind of wanted to start off light in my first attempt at doing this and kind of just talk about something that I'm finding out recently is a big deal in our communities, just as far as emotional intelligence. And for some of you, you may know, some of you may not, but in general, the idea of us being aware of what we're feeling, why we're feeling it, when these things happen to us, like when we have certain triggers or stresses that happen, why we respond the way we do, is kind of encompassing this thing called emotional intelligence. And I just want to talk about, like I said, so recognizing what that is, talking about what that, what it looks like, field any questions that you may have, and just kind of ways that we maybe can improve our emotional intelligence without going into details. We maybe save that for another day, but just maybe towards the end, we'll come up with some basic things that we can do to kind of improve our emotional intelligence. So you can go to the next slide. All right, so just the general definition of emotional intelligence. I may refer to it as EI when we talk, just to shorten it up. But basically, it encompasses the ability to identify, understand, and manage your emotions, as well as the emotions of others around you. And so why this is important is because oftentimes something will happen. We'll either have a physical reaction, or we'll have like some kind of mental reaction. Say, for instance, we get cut off in traffic. Our physical reaction may be to show a sign or do something to the other person, honk a horn or flash a light to let them know that we were displeased at what they did. Or we might become flushed in the face. We might sweat a little bit. We might get angry. There's just responses that we have to things that happen to us. And so understanding why that happens, what that is, how to manage it can kind of better help us live our lives. And so one of the part of recognizing emotions is being able to understand the difference between like anger and frustration, and joy and contentment. Oftentimes we'll think we're angry about something and we'll kind of display a certain behavior, but it's really that we're frustrated. Like our kids did something we didn't like, and we may not necessarily be angry. It may make us angry that we did that thing, but the underlying emotion is just frustration because we talked about this thing over and over and over again. Ask you to put your clothes up over and over again. Ask you to pick up your shoes. I asked my daughter, pick up your earrings. I stepped on another earring. Now my foot is bleeding. So, I might be angry because my foot is bleeding, but it's really, I'm frustrated because I've had this conversation over and over again with my child. And then understanding emotions is being able to understand kind of the feelings that influence your behavior and the decisions that you make. Because we can make decisions in the moment, or we can have behaviors in the moment that maybe that we wouldn't do if we took time to think about it, and kind of stepped out of the situation before we kind of responded. So it's always good to understand our emotions and what drives them. And then management of emotions is the big thing. It's like, man, we have to be able to, no matter what happens, especially as Black people in America, we have to be able to manage our emotions in such a way, because the greater society is not really, meant for us to be able to display things how we generally would display things. We get excited, we get amped up, our voices might get louder, we might get boisterous, we might get big. It doesn't mean we're angry or want to fight or whatever. It's just sometimes sometimes some members of our community, that's how we express ourselves. And so, especially when it comes to being in the workplace and you may have something that doesn't go your way or something that you don't like. And if you don't express yourself in a certain way, you're going to be seen as an angry Black person. And it may not be necessarily that you are that, but as we learn to kind of display our emotions or manage our emotions in a better way, we don't have to get marked as that. And sometimes we can't help that. People will kind of label us that anyway. And then the last thing is kind of just our interactions with others. When we are emotionally intelligent, when we're aware of what we have going on, we're able to manage the emotions of others. Like, hey, diffuse situations or get people to calm down, or we're able to maybe even help people when they're feeling bad or when they're feeling down. We're able to recognize that they're going through something and be able to kind of help them as well. So it's just, again, identify, understanding, managing emotions, and it's not if you as we begin to talk and as we go a little further, I don't want you to think this is like bad if your emotional intelligence is low or you're good if your emotional intelligence is high. It's just a conversation about being aware of what emotional intelligence look like, and again, how we can improve or what we can do different in terms of emotional intelligence. All right,
Yeah,
you can go to the next slide.
yeah, you were talking about.
Did anybody have questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were talking about, just sometimes culturally how we express our emotions. And I was having a conversation with one of the schools that I volunteer at over here on the east side, and we were just saying, that the year's going great, no big deals, but people, on the other side of the city or county, they kind of look at the children over here at this particular school, and they're wild, they're this, they're that. And the reality is, when you're there, it's calm, it's cool. But people, just because we might talk a little louder every now or get a little bit more expressive, then this labeling comes in. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how we even how we exist, in a situation to where people are labeling and judging us, based on the fact that our emotions are just expressed a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and I feel like that's just a problem with the way culture is in the United States, especially, and it's probably across the globe. But it's just like, we are expected to express ourselves in a certain way that makes people comfortable. Just like you're making a perfect example for children in schools. Studies will show that Black children are punished more often and more harsher in schools because teachers perceive that Black children need to be punished more often and more harsh in order to control their behavior. And again, it's a simple situation as, hey, John Parker won't sit down in class because I'm bored, because I'm smart, I've done all the work. And if you give me more work to do or give me something to do in class, like be a student helper or something, I might be able to manage my anxious energy a little bit more. But again, it's just kind of how things work, and we're kind of labeled as a problem when people don't understand what we have going on. So you're right, exactly right on that. And do you want me to pause and ask for questions as we talk, or do you want to save it for the end? What's the best format that you found works? I should ask
whatever you're comfortable with. We normally kind of allow dialogue and discussion as we go, but whatever you're comfortable with.
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to open up if anybody had any general questions just in the beginning before we get into it about like what I've already said, and if things kind of make sense in terms of just identifying, understanding, and kind of managing your emotional intelligence.
I have a question, John. Good evening, and I love the subject. Emotional intelligence, is that something that we're born with, or is it something that skill that we acquire as we grow and develop?
She's gonna start with the heavy stuff right out the front. All right. Yes, no, it is definitely something. It's a learned behavior on one end, right? How we grow up, the home we grow up in, the school we attend, the neighborhood environment that's going around, can impact our emotional intelligence. It's not like IQ or something. Well, it is kind of like IQ. It's something that can be socially adapted. It's something that can be taught. It's something that we can learn. It's kind of all of the above. And no one is born less emotionally intelligent than someone else, unless they have some type of mental handicap or something like that. But our development and how we develop our emotional intelligence can be affected. For instance, if I grow up in a neighborhood, there's a lot of violence, there's police sirens going off all the time, our neighbor's door gets kicked in because maybe they're selling drugs, and there's dogs and there's barking and there's loud bangs. Those type of environments can harden us or make us develop in a certain way that can hinder our emotional intelligence. For instance, and I hate the word intelligence, but it's just kind of the word that's there. We may begin to just have a negative disposition when it comes to interacting with police or community members or social workers or whatever, based on the way in which we've come to interact with them. Again, only time the police comes when they're kicking in your neighbor's door or something like that. And so when you're thinking about your emotions and being able to manage your emotions, if every time you see a dog is being used to attack somebody in your neighborhood by the police, when you see a dog, you might freak out, you might get scared, you might run, you might panic. And so emotional intelligence, again, involves managing your emotions. And so hopefully that makes sense, but your emotions can be affected by the things that happen as you grow up, the way your parents lead you or teach you or abuse you or whatever the case may be, or neglect, or in good ways. They can put good things in you, and your neighborhood can put good things in you. Your parents can put good things in you, and your school environment can put good things in you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, the a main reason why emotional intelligence is important. There's a lot of things that go into emotional intelligence, and on a very basic level, what I want us to understand is it improves our relationships with people. When we're able to understand how we feel, manage those emotions, understand how other people feel, we're better able to maintain and to start and begin healthy relationships. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you don't understand why they're always angry about something or why they always cry when certain things happen, and you're unable to even to interact with them, like, oh man, my wife is always crying, like, oh, it just makes me want to run away and hide. It doesn't help us build relationships. But as our emotional intelligence increases and gets better, we're able to improve our relationships and kind of better live with others. Having strong emotional intelligence can reduce stress. Oftentimes, as Black people, we have stress that's in our bodies that can be passed down for generations. It's something called intergenerational trauma. They also have post-traumatic slave syndrome. There's a lot of things that happens in our body, and there's something else called epigenetics we won't go into, but basically epigenetics says that we have dormant stressors in our body, and when something happens in real life, those things come alive and they can create depression, anxiety, different type of stress when it wasn't even there before. But because these things are lying dormant in our DNA, it's almost like a cancer, like it just sits there. And then when something happens, it triggers something in us. And that can be passed down from grandma to mother to daughter. And they've done studies in rats where they've seen where they can induce certain stressors for rats, and they have never in their lives kind of dealt with certain stressors. And then when that thing happens, this thing gets triggered in their body, and they can measure it and see how that stressor is affecting their body, and they can also see that in their the previous generations that have existed. So I'm not trying to get too technical, but the idea we can hold stress and depression and anxiety in our bodies, and it can be lying dormant, and it can just kind of pop up based on our life circumstances and situations. Does that make sense, Jan?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Okay. And so by having emotional intelligence, we can kind of reduce stress because we can say, hey, you know what? I've noticed that whenever I get to a stoplight and I hear a siren, my heart beats fast, my hands start sweating. And it's not because I've done anything wrong. It's just that I've had interactions with the police. And y'all find out I've had a lot of interactions with the police, so that's a go-to example for me. But I get nervous when I hear sirens go off, and my heart starts beating fast. I get nervous. I start sweating because of my interactions. And so once I'm aware, like, oh, you know what? It's a siren, but it could be an ambulance. It could be a fire truck. It could be a police, but they're not coming for me. So now that I'm aware of how I react in those situations, I don't have to be high stress when those things happen. And so when we're emotionally intelligent, we can kind of better manage those situations. We can make better decisions. There's a term called flooding. And some of you may have experienced, say somebody makes you upset or you get frustrated with something and you just can't pull yourself together. You stutter, you can't think straight, your mind starts wandering. And when that flooding happens, we're not able to make the best decisions, or we can't do anything at all. We might freeze, we might run, we might do things that don't warrant that situation. But when our emotional intelligence gets built up, when flooding happens, we can step back and say, man, I'm really frustrated right now. I'm really angry right now. I feel a certain way, but I don't have to respond in this moment. I don't have to react to that person. I don't have to tell that person off or whatever. And we can make better decisions. that way. And then again, generally overall, emotional intelligence has been linked to a lot of good outcomes, including better mental health, better physical health, better happiness, and much more success in life. Any questions? Okay, you can go to the next slide, Pastor. All right, so hopefully you can see this. So basically, this is kind of a chart of what emotional intelligence kind of looks like, and kind of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of the areas in which emotional intelligence affects your life. And so if we're looking at the top right corner, that's purple, it talks about self-awareness. And again, that's recognizing and understanding your own emotions. One thing I would like to ask, if there's men in the room, if I say Pastor Ross, if you ask me how I'm doing and I say I'm fine, what does that mean to you?
You fine?
Exactly. And you know what I mean when I say that, right?
Right, right. Everything's
Right.
straight. You
If
straight.
my wife asks me, yeah, I'm straight. If my wife asks me how I'm doing and I say fine, the world is ending. What does it mean? What do you mean fine? What is fine? You know, it's very complicated, right? And so in trying to be a successful husband and wanting my wife to be on the same page as me, I have to go a little deeper in my back sometimes and give her a little bit more than fine, right? Because my fine is pretty much I keep it consistent. I could be happy, I could be sad, I could whatever, but I'm fine. You know, as long as I'm not fussing and going off and going crazy, I'm fine. But it's a general, it's a general thing. And some people they're okay with the fine, and some people they aren't. And so, but there's often times where I could be feeling stressed or I could be anxious, and I could still tell my wife I'm fine, but I'm not sleeping well. I'll maybe have some bad dreams that she wakes me up from, or she'll notice that I'm a little more short with the kids. And so with self-awareness comes the ability to be able to say, you know what, I'm passing off this idea that I'm fine, but I'm not really fine. And now that I'm noticing, or my wife is telling me that I'm not sleeping well, that I may be having bad dreams, or she notices that I'm being short with the kids, I need to dig a little deep and figure out what's really going on and what's happening in my life. There's a meme that was going around, and it had the words "you good," like "you good" in question marks. And "you good" can mean so many things. Are you okay? Do you
Right.
want to fight? Like, you good, bro? Like, what's happening? You good? Like, there's so many things that come along with the phrase "you good." And it was just a meme, just kind of saying that, like, hey, there are so many, especially Black people, there's so many underlying expressions that come with simple terms and simple phrases. And so we have to dig in our bag sometimes and just become aware of how we can really express how we're really feeling, so that we can really just be articulate in a way that we understand what's going on and other people understand what's going on. Any questions on that? Any comments, concerns? Anybody with the self-awareness piece? Okay, well, we'll jump into self-regulation. And self-regulation is the bottom, I guess, right side. That's kind of like light blue. And basically, self-regulation is about managing your emotions effectively. So if you think about, I don't know how many football fans we have, but if you're watching a football game, and if you see the quarterback is under pressure, he's about to get sacked. Some quarterbacks will stay in the pocket and wait to the last minute and get rid of the ball. Some quarterbacks will run out of the pocket and they'll scramble. And some will take a sack because they just freeze up and they don't know what to do. And so with self-regulation, it's kind of one of those things where you recognize a situation is happening. You're recognizing you're about to get sacked, but do you stay in the pocket and throw a good pass? Do you run out and make a play with your feet? Or do you stand there and freeze and get tackled? And so as our emotional intelligence goes, we kind of find ourselves in those situations where it's called a fight or flight or freeze, or whatever the case may be. And we want to get to a place where some may say, well, scrambling is a sign of distress, but sometimes you got to run. Like, hey, like I don't want to stand in this pocket any longer and throw this football. I got to get out of here, and that's okay. And then sometimes being able to stay calm and look around and find the open receiver is also okay. And sometimes you may have to take a sack because you don't want to make a bad decision, and you'll be able to live to fight another day. But it's good to have that awareness that however you respond, as long as you're responding in a way that's good, it's okay to have those emotions. It's okay to respond that way. But we want to move in a space where we're able to self-regulate and not just the pressure comes and we just scream and run the opposite direction. Like that doesn't work, using my football analogy. And we want to have that self-regulation that allows us to be cool, calm under pressure. And for empathy, which is the bottom section is green, is really being able to understand how other people feel. And there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is just like recognizing that something's going on and like, oh man, that's tough. Sorry to hear that. I hope you make it. But empathy is really being able to put yourself in that person's shoes and say, man, John just lost his job. I may or may not have lost a job before, but I've lost something else that really was important to me. I understand what he's going through, and let me proceed and have conversations with John coming from a place of empathy. Let me show compassion to my friend or to a person that's in distress. And believe it or not, a lot of people lack empathy, and it's not because they're psychopaths or sociopaths or anything like that, but it's just something that, you know, depending on how you grow up, you may just grow up in a household where people told you to tough it out, you know, put some ice on it, walk it off, you know, dust yourself off and pick yourself up. And so you didn't build up the piece of character that allows you to feel for others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're deficit, but it's just like, hey man, hey, I broke my leg. My dad told me to put some ice on it, walk it off. Like, you know, but dad, my leg is broke. Hey man, tough it out. You'll be all right. And so may not have developed that empathy. Motivation on the bottom left in the orange kind of just talks about this idea where you don't always have to pull from outside sources to be motivated to do things. When your emotional intelligence is high, or when you're working in a good optimal emotional intelligence, you're able to kind of still do your work, still get up in the morning, achieve your goals, be motivated by things outside of money or status or fame. You're in a good, healthy place where you recognize it's good to do good, just to do good. It's good to help my neighbor because it's good to help my neighbor. It's good to finish this project at work because I got other people counting on me at work. And again, there could be other things at play that we're not talking about in terms of like real diagnosis with anxiety, depression, stress, or whatever. But just in general, whatever situation you find yourself in, even if things aren't going your way in life, you're still able to do the things for yourself and others that allow you to be successful and kind of do what you need to be done. And then lastly, social skills. Again, the whole thing with emotional intelligence is you want to be able to navigate the world and relationships with others in a way that's successful and beneficial for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think that I think it's good to get to the place to where you can identify and have this skill set, because I remember, I think it was about 2002. My wife, she had something called, fibroids, and they were really depleting her iron, and so she was tired all the time. When in Bible studies, she used to have, kneel down where most people were, everybody else was sitting on the pew. She was on her knees because her back was hurting, and because I couldn't relate, I couldn't be of assistance at all. I was really a detriment because I couldn't relate. And I think I lacked empathy, in that place right there, because I just couldn't relate. And then something happened. I mean, this was after the fact. She went and she had the surgery, got rid of them, everything was fine. And then years later, it kind of clicked in my mind that I have to do better, even though I'm not a woman. I have to do better at trying to connect and relate. And so I guess that takes listening, takes doing research on your own, seeing what someone's dealing with, but taking the time to try to see what it is that that person is dealing with, and it can take you from a place of sympathy to empathy, because sympathy is fine, but it makes sometimes kind of makes you seem a little heartless, if you don't have the empathy. And so being able to know that, what, I got to get better in this area. I got to strengthen my skills in this area, my intelligence in this area right here. I think this is a good thing to be able to manage our emotions.
I agree 100%.
John?
Yes, ma'am.
Roxy again. I just wanted to, that was a good example that you used about the football player in terms of self-regulation. I just want to share this experience that I had with my 18-year-old granddaughter, who was in the process of trying to select courses for her fall semester in college. And of course, this being the first time, and she was trying to do her best because she was required to take the core courses, but of course, she wanted to select some things that would help her for her career in the future. So as she was going through the course selections, and she got so very frustrated because this is the first time that she did it. So she went and she asked her dad, what do you think I should take? Should I take this with this and that? And by the time they got finished, she was so frustrated. This is a story that my daughter shared with me. She was so frustrated, and she didn't know what to do. And so what she did was she tried to, I guess, in a sense, do her self regulations. So what she left her bedroom, left the computer, went into her dad's bedroom, and opened up his closet, and she started punching his clothing as she wanted to get that frustration out of her. So after that, I asked my daughter, I said, how did she feel of that? She said she went back into her computer and she sat there and she made a decision in terms of the courses that she wanted to select. So her way of regulating was not to strike out at the person, but something that the person had their belonging. She started punching the clothing. So I just thought that was something that was so unusual, but it said to me, each person has their way of handling situations and self-regulating. She didn't hurt anyone. She didn't hurt her dad, but she was able to get through that by releasing that anxiety, stress, and I guess sense anger. And she went on and was successful in making the right selection for her courses for the semester. So I just wanted to share that.
That was good. No, that was very good. And I think that that is a way in which we don't often enough teach people to be able to be expressed, to be able to get that, to have a physical manifestation of the frustration and the stress that they're feeling without it being, of course, hitting somebody else or doing some damage to property or whatever. Like when I'm doing counseling with kids, I often will say, sometimes you have to scream into a pillow. Sometimes you have to ask your parents to get you a punching bag. Sometimes you got to do push-ups. Sometimes you got to go run around. There's just certain ways in which everybody manages the stress different. And there's not always a cookie cutter way in which you can get that emotion out. Of course, when you're a child, you got to be respectful. You can't, like it's good that she didn't punch her dad or somebody other adult in the house. But the idea is that she knew that she needed to discharge that. And she found a way to discharge that and was able to come back and sit down and do her thing. And I think that was very mature in that situation. And I think sometimes too, especially as Black people, African Americans, we have to. There's a thin line between like respect and disrespect, and oftentimes there's a lot of things that we have to recognize is, hey, we have to learn our children and know how to allow them to be frustrated in healthy ways, to be angry in healthy ways, and then help them develop that so that they can express that in a way that's not detrimental to themselves or to our families or whatever. And so, it looks different for different people. Some people are like, oh man, I wish my kid would go in my closet and punch my clothes. But I'm like, why is that a problem? Like who are they hurting and what's the issue? You just want to be in control probably of that situation. You're mad that they punched your clothes, but who, like you said, who was harmed in that? And then she was able to come back to the table and be cool. And so this is part of the emotional challenge too. Like it's a good thing that dad didn't get frustrated and fuss at her for doing that. Like that's bravo and kudos to both of them in that situation. Anyone else before we go to the next slide? Okay, we go to the next slide. So the next few slides kind of just reiterate what I kind of already went over with the previous slide with the graph, but I wanted to have a little more in-depth conversation just in terms of like the importance of these things. So we talked about self-awareness and how it's, fundamental and a key component of emotional intelligence. But what I wanted to do is talk about how we recognize stress or just different emotions that may seem like stress, how we understand and recognize triggers, and how we monitor our reactions. And so when it comes to recognizing stress, oftentimes because of just how life goes, we think that our heart beating fast or getting tight in our muscles, not being able to sleep well, having an upset stomach is just, it's just a part of life, and these are things that happen. But if we pay attention and recognize when these things are happening to us, it's our body trying to tell us that we're experiencing something that we don't like, or something that is harmful to us, or whatever the case may be. And so we might be a situation where it may be normal before a big game or before a big speech or for a presentation that you have butterflies in your stomach, because that's your body's way of letting you know, like, hey, I'm anxious about this thing, but like, how are we going to get through this? But oftentimes we'll have other more serious things happen, like heart attacks or strokes or different things which are on the far end, that we've been so stressed for so long, or having so much anxiety for so long that didn't get dealt with, that it manifests itself in physical, it has physical repercussions. And then next thing you know, we have a stroke, and next thing we have a heart attack. And then those things aren't always related to stress, but it can happen. We can get ulcers, we can lose our hair. Like, there's a lot of things that happens when we're under stress, or when we have different emotional issues going on. And so being able to recognize the signs of those things are going to be very important for us for our lives. And managing those things is very important, because we have a way, I think, in our culture of just pushing through things and issues and problems and disturbances in our everyday life, because we don't have time to like be worried and stressed out. Like, you know what I'm saying? People say I'm sick and tired of being tired, but sometimes we don't even have time to deal with the things that are making us sick and tired, because we got to keep going. We got to feed our kids. We got to go to work. We got to do this. But it's important for us and for our life and for our longevity that we start to become more cognizant, and we recognize when we're under stress or when we're feeling pressure and things of that nature. And so I think part of that is the second part, understanding triggers. And so with that, I do this thing when I'm talking with clients, and it's called the crazy cycle. And so how this starts is, we'll start with a trigger. And to explain what a trigger or stressor is, we're like, Pastor Rawls, is there anything in your past that you say something that made you upset, and maybe it was the same person would do the same thing all the time? It's like, maybe you go to your uncle's house and your uncle would joan on you, or crack jokes on you, talk about your feet or something like that. Have you ever had a situation that you could think of that would get a rise out of you and make you feel negative, or make you want to hurt somebody, or do something that you would normally do that you can pinpoint, that is the thing that makes me upset? Not to put you on the spot, but put you on the spot.
Yeah, not necessarily over and over, but I know one thing that triggered me real bad, that probably has a lot to do with me not accepting anything from certain people, is I remember me and my friends, we were riding our bikes, and we were from the east side, and we were riding our bikes out on the west side, and it was this big hill before you get to Westwood Middle School, but we were totally out of our land, and we were in another whole nother part of town on 8th Avenue, and as we were riding our bikes, some white guys in a big truck threw their drinks out at us, and then from that point on, I think at that point, I think I was probably about 12 years old. But from that point on, actually the next day I went to school and had a fight with a white guy, and but from that point on, I've had very little tolerance, and I didn't think about it until you just made me answer that question. But I've had a very low toleration rate for white people doing things that are disrespectful to me.
Yep. And you kind of that summarized the whole, what we call the crazy cycle, is that not that you're crazy or something's wrong with you, but you have a trigger that happens. Somebody throws a drink at you, and racially motivated or whatever the situation is, and it makes you feel a certain way. Generally, when that trigger happens, we have two responses. We have a physical response, where it could be like, again, you feel something in your stomach, you feel nauseous, you get butterflies, you start sweating. That's a physical reaction to somebody throwing the drink at you. But then you might have an immediate, like you might have like picked up a rock and threw something at the truck. Like, that's still a physical reaction. Like, you do something in response to the thing that happens. But then there's also an emotional response. You may get angry, you may get sad, you may cry, you have some type of emotional response in regards to that trigger. So what happens is, with a lot of people, is that in between the trigger happening and you having a response that is something that you don't want to do, i.e. having to fight at the next day at school, we don't have any self-regulation or nothing that kind of happens to help us process that situation, so that we don't respond in a way that's negative. And so another situation is like if you are in a relationship with somebody, say you're married, and every time you get out the shower, the mat is wet because your spouse got out the shower, and say they're the type of person that doesn't dry off in the shower, they dry off out on the mat. You're the type of person that dries off in the shower, so you expect to have a dry mat when you step out the shower. Every time you step out the shower and that mat is wet, and you're the person that don't like the wet mat, it might send you into a tizzy, and you might get fussing and yelling. I done told you about the da 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 da. And it's like, you know what? If you think about it, it's really not a big deal. You can have a conversation peacefully with that person, explain like, hey man, I would really appreciate it if you didn't leave the wet mat, or realize it's not life or death and use another bathroom. There's so many different things you can do. And so when you're emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent, you can be offended by something, or something can happen, and you don't always have to respond in a way that's driven by your emotions, or that's driven by some negativity that you want to react into the other person because they've done something to you. Does that make sense, y'all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the idea with understanding your triggers is like, if we just living in life where everything just sets us off, and we never take the time to spend and be like, man, why do I get so upset when I step on this wet mat? Why do I get so upset when somebody in a pickup truck does something or says something or throws something at me? Why do I get upset? And that's a big thing, but it can be small things. It can be simple stuff as like you're at work and somebody warms something up in the microwave and it's fish, and you got food smells all in the office, and you ready to flip tables over and go off because you hate that food smell. But it could be something, it could be a trigger from a childhood trauma. It could be you just don't like the smell. It could be you're allergic to whatever it is, but you don't have to respond by tearing up the office and making a big scene. But if you're not aware that you're having these feelings, eventually you're only going to be able to take so much and you might explode. So what I'm talking about with emotional intelligence and self-awareness is just being able to understand, like, man, as we get older and we have a better command of our language and our just as we become more mature, you would expect a 6-year-old to have a tantrum potentially, but not a 36-year-old, not a 26-year-old, maybe not even a 6-year-old. As we grow, we got to understand and have conversations with ourselves, with others, to help us get to the place where we can not be set off so easily by the triggers that set us off. And then again, self-awareness, kind of just monitoring your reactions, kind of what I've already said. You want to be able to not be reactive all the time, and you want to be able to not have to have your impulses lead you all the time, and you definitely don't want to engage in destructive behavior based on you being triggered. And the part of emotional intelligence and self-awareness is being able to step back from reacting, being able to say, hey, I know it happened. I wish this person wouldn't do that. This is not okay. And then be able to respond in a way that's safe and polite and positive. And again, I'm not saying you got to take somebody throwing something at you out of a pickup truck and calling you racial names, but at some point in time, you got to be smart in how you respond and how you do things, and going to school the next day and fighting somebody maybe won't be the best way all the time to handle that.
And the reality is I really didn't learn how to deal with that until I was an adult, married, and working. And a trigger happened. A trigger happened again. I think I was probably about 22 years old, and but I was working and taking care of a family, and then I almost lost a job because a person, a white person, did something that triggered me, and then I almost lost a $55,000 a year job as an adult trying to take care of a family because of that right there. And at that point when that happened, that's when I said, I got played. He played me like a puppet. He did what he did to get a response. He got it, and I almost lost my job. And so really, that behavior took place. It stuck with me from 12 to probably about 23 years old, 24 years old, before I was able to think wisely. And so I think about how I could have really destroyed my life in that 10, 11 years.
And it's very interesting. There's a TV show called First 48. I don't know if anybody's ever watched it, but it's pretty much like this reality, or I don't know, reality show-ish, where it's almost like Cops, the old school Cops TV show, where you have these situations where they say when a homicide happens, the first 48 hours is the most important for homicide detectives to solve a crime. I watch that show all the time, and I have mixed emotions because it's usually Black young men. They're in cities like Cleveland, Atlanta, Miami, different places where a murder will take place. But very often it's because somebody felt disrespected, or somebody did something to somebody they didn't like, or somebody tried to holler at somebody's girlfriend, just some silly stuff that because they don't have self-regulation skills, they're unable to realize like that thing wasn't a big deal, or this is not something that I should respond in violence. And you have all these young black men getting locked up in city after city after city after city because they had an emotional response to something that happened, and it led them to committing a crime and doing something they had no business doing. And we just gotta help ourselves, man. We gotta help our people. We gotta learn how to better deal with those situations. Because like you said, Pastor Rawls, you throw your life away in a split second because you didn't like something that happened, and your whole life is gone after that, or you ruined somebody else's life, you know. Yeah, and you go on to the next slide. Self-regulation, we kind of already been talking about it, but in general, it involves managing your emotions in a way that is healthy and productive. And self-regulation is crucial for maintaining composure, making rational decisions, and avoiding impulsive actions. And we've been talking about it, but just again, self-regulations is like, hey, how do I control this feeling that I'm feeling? And then how do I respond in a proactive way, calmly, or whatever the situation may be? And again, it's like, I have 3 children. One is 8, one is 6, and one is 2. The 2-year-old is the boss of the house. And so there's very often times where she's 2 years old and she don't know what's going on, but she'll do something that's, naughty, as we say in my house. And she may know very well that she shouldn't have did it. And I would be a fool to get worked up and go back and forth and argue with her about what she did, knowing that she care less and she'll probably do it again tomorrow. And you know what I'm saying? And the more, and she's funny because the more I try to be like, so today we were out playing catch with a baseball, and she threw the ball away because she was frustrated about something. And I was like, hey, we're not going nowhere until you put the ball up. And she's like, oh yeah. And she just walks off. And she's 2 years old. She's like, well, I ain't picking up the ball and I ain't listening to that you saying. And so I was like, now I can go the route of saying that she picks the ball up and put it in my hand and make her do it. But I said, you know what? I'm gonna just figure out something different. I say, you know what? No more baseball for the rest of the day if you can't do the right thing. And that takes a lot of maturity for me, because I, as those that come to the church know that I grew up in a time in an environment where disrespect, was not tolerated. 2 years old, 22 years old, 102 years old. We ready to do something. But with my daughter, I want to show her compassion and I want to love her the right way. And so instead of trying to, instead of reacting angrily or making her, you're gonna do what I told you to do, I was like, hey, I'm just gonna put the glove up and I'll put the ball up. And so when I picked the ball up and walked away with the ball in the glove, she's like, no. And then she was like, all right. So I put the ball back down exactly where it was. She went and picked the ball up. She put the ball in my glove and we were able to keep playing. And I was like, wow, this is great. And it helped me realize, like, I don't have to respond in such a way that it's just like, all the time. They call me Grumpy Cat in my house. I don't have to be Grumpy Cat all the time. But if I respond in love and in kindness, I can get a good reaction from those around me. And so self-regulation is really just about being able to take that step back and being assertive if you need to, but not being aggressive. Assertive is what I did with like, hey, we're not playing, but I didn't have to get aggressive. I didn't have to give her no taps. I didn't have to yell at her and act a fool in public. And it kind of worked out. The other thing with self-regulation is stress management, where you're kind of really learning techniques to reduce stress or prevent you from kind of getting worked up in a way that affects your health or affects relationships. And so one of those things, we're probably not going to have time today to talk about a bunch of techniques, and maybe we can do a follow-up session. But just really, if you're at work and say you have stressful deadlines, and you realize and recognize, like, man, I'm really worked up right now, I'm really anxious, I'm really under a lot of stress. There's certain things we call relaxation techniques, like deep breathing, where you can take a step back, say you turn off your phone for 5 minutes, you turn off your ringer on your phone, you don't respond to any emails, you sit at your desk, you close your eyes, put your feet on the ground, and you just deep breathe. You just breathe in deep. You're not thinking about nothing. You're not worried about the time. You're breathing in deep. Inhale, exhale. And you do that a few times, and you'll find out that, hey, it ain't as bad as you thought it was. You know what I'm saying? You have to be conscious, and you have to intentionally not go back into that frenzied state. But we can easily bring ourselves down from high stress feelings, from the anxiety and all this, by doing something as simple as deep breathing, regulating our body, making sure that we're in charge of our body and our body's not in charge of us. And then we can get back to doing that thing is stressful in a way that we're calm and we're not flooded with all these emotions and we're not all worked up. But that comes with time, and that comes with learning how to deal with that. And then the other thing that I have on there is adaptability. Oh, did somebody have something? I'm sorry.
And John, I just want to add to
Yes.
that in terms of stress management. One thing that I'm retired now, but one thing that I did when I was working, and there were stressful times when I needed to meet the deadline, and if it was a lot of times, what I would do is I would schedule mental health days. I found out that by taking when I got to that point on my job where there was so much stress to take time off. And I realized that I had more sick time because I didn't have to use sick time. I used what I call mental health days. And then I was able to come back. I managed my stress in that type of way. And then after I would take that time off, I would be able to come back and perform even at a higher level. So that's one thing that I did for stress management to take time out of the workplace.
That's beautiful. That's great. And that's something that's definitely underutilized. We work ourselves to death at a job and never take time off and never take sick leave and all that other stuff. But it's definitely important. And the last thing for adaptability is really just, again, say you're at work, you've been working on a project, and then all of a sudden it gets restructured, or your manager says, I don't like this thing that you've been working on for a month, 10 hours a day. They're like, we're going to scrap that and do something different. That can really work somebody up and get somebody frustrated and have you turning over desks and tables at your office. But when you're emotionally aware, when you have adaptability, when you're able to self-regulate, you can hear that. Maybe frustrated, maybe you got to go home and punch some clothes in your closet, or whatever the case may be. But you're able to kind of adapt to that change without it like rocking your world and sending you into, just a place that's not healthy for you. We can go to the next slide. Any questions on the self-regulation? All right. So empathy, as we kind of talked about it before, I'll just kind of list these three things. So active listening, perspective taking, and helping in times of need. So active listening is kind of one of those things where we have that hard sometimes. A lot of people listen to respond. They're not listening to understand. They just waiting for you to finish your point and stop talking so they can interject and say what they have to say. But when it comes to empathy, one of the things that I struggle with when I counsel people is when you're doing like bereavement counseling, or when you're really helping somebody work through a hard time. People just say things that aren't kind, that aren't nice, that aren't wise. Oftentimes, it's kind of like Job and his buddies, right? You're going through something. Somebody's passed away. You've lost a job. Things are going crazy, and people just say stuff, especially when death. That they'll I don't know. I don't want to trigger anybody, but you just hear some of the craziest things when you're in an environment and somebody's trying to console somebody, and they'll just say something that's completely off the wall and makes no sense, and you're just like, why would you say that? And sometimes you need to learn just to be quiet and just listen. Let the person vent, let the person say what they need to say, let them share, let them talk about what they got going on, giving them your full attention, and letting them and giving them their understanding. And if they ask for advice, give it, or if they ask for help, give it. But just being conscious and being I don't know, just being aware of what somebody's got going on and what you're saying. And one of the things that I won't say it's science, but the general thought with like men and women is that if you say you're in a middle relationship or just a relationship, it could be sister, brother, whatever. But men want to have solutions, and then sometimes women just want to vent. So you have a situation where your wife, they're not asking for your help, they're not asking for a solution, they're not asking you to fix nothing. They just want to talk. And I'm like, man, we got to figure this out. We got to solve this problem. We got to, and then I make the situation worse because I'm not listening. I'm not having empathy. I'm not just letting my wife explain what's going on. I'm trying to get to the solution, and usually the solution is who you want me to fight, but that's not what I need to do either. But the idea is just more so being able to listen, let the person talk, let the person vent, and not say anything. And that's a skill that we just don't have sometimes, and we just say off the wall stuff or do things that don't help. But we have to learn better.
And John, I totally agree. To let them lead. We always assume that this is the right thing, and in assuming, but not listening to them first and letting them lead. And sometimes, as we all call, we should be professional listeners and let them talk. And sometimes I find they find their own solution as they talk, and then they listen to what they're saying, and they don't say, oh, maybe I should do this, or maybe I should do that. But just to listen and let them take the lead in talking.
100%. That active listening is a game changer. I agree with you. And then quickly with perspective taking, is kind of one of those things where they say walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. Oftentimes we'll have conversations, somebody will get to talking or something's going on. And instead of just sitting with that and saying, man, like, I've never been in that situation, but I can only imagine how it would feel, and just think that. You don't have to say anything. You could just kind of be in that space where it's like, hey, like, man, like, if I'm having a conversation with you and you respond in a way that I didn't like, if I'm trying to gain understanding of why you responded that way, I can ask questions to try to get clarity on why you responded that way, instead of assuming you meant to hurt me, that you meant to harm me, that you meant to make me feel a certain way. Again, my wife and I, we communicate completely different, and she's a verbal processor, and she'll say something that she doesn't mean, and then I'll be the guy that's like, well, hey, it came out your mouth. Remember what you said, and you stand on that. But then she'll say, no, I didn't mean that. I was thinking out loud. I didn't mean to say that. Let me take that back. And I'm like, nope, you can't take it back. And then it just becomes a thing when I'm like, let's let her explain what she was thinking. Let her go through her process. And then if I was offended by something, I can say, hey, when you said XYZ, did you mean this? And once I take to understand what she means and what she's saying and what she's trying to articulate and what the point she's trying to make, then I'm able not to get worked up myself. I'm able not to be offended. And I'm able to step back from being in that space where I just want to be mad because she said the wrong thing. And oftentimes in conversations and communication and when we're thinking through life and living life with people, we don't care to understand where they're coming from, because we're too busy wanting to be offended. We're too busy wanting to fight. We're too busy wanting to strike back. And we can't live life that way. It's not a good way to live. And again, it's a sign of low emotional intelligence when you just like to bicker and want to make people stick and push them against the wall and press them, instead of really trying to understand what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then the helping in the times of need is kind of one of those things, again, like we just been talking. When somebody is grieving, we just there to provide emotional support and offer practical help. Hey, can I get you a meal? Hey, can I come help you clean your house? Hey, can I, give you a break? Maybe, you got a bunch of kids and you just need a break. I mean, one thing I'm grateful about Greater Bethel is we have plenty of people that ask us all the time, hey, you need us to watch your kids, come drop them off. Me and Yvonne are like, what you say? You say, what now? Drop them off, you say. And we'd be more than happy to take a little evening stroll, or, just spend some time with each other. And that's what community is about. That's what family is about. That's what empathy is about. Being able to have people around you that's like, hey, y'all look like y'all need a nap. And a lot of our date nights end up just being naps, because we just need naps, and so that's a part of empathy and helping in times of need, just being the type of person. It's not everybody's not a gift of hospitality or whatever the case may be, but if you can help and see somebody struggling with some stuff, and you can offer, again, just a helping hand, a shoulder to cry on, a shoulder to lean on, we have to be better as people of recognizing when people are in need, and we got to be strong with the empathy. Any questions, comments? All right, I'm running out of time, so I'll kind of fly through the social skills. At the end of the day, social skills with emotional intelligence allows you to kind of manage conflict well. It gives you effective communication skills, and it's good leadership skills. When your emotional intelligence is high and you're hitting on all cylinders, as they say, it's much easier for you to manage conflict, to say what you need to say effectively, and to lead others well. Any questions on that before I go to the next? Okay. So just briefly wanted to kind of go through this. And so I'm not trying to poke at nobody, and I don't want, nobody sending me any emails. I don't want no problems in the parking lot at church, but recognizing low emotional intelligence. It's not, again, if you find yourself in any of these spaces, it's not a slight on you. It's not saying that, hey, something's wrong with you and you're in a deficit. It's more so just recognizing, like, hey, like, again, do I lack self-awareness? Am I able to understand what's going on around me, what's happening in my environment? Am I able to recognize triggers? Am I able to recognize when I'm stressed? Or do I just walk around saying I'm fine all day, knowing that I'm burning up on the inside and I'm passing out and I'm, and I'm stressing out and I'm fainting all the time because I'm not aware of what's going on. Another thing that's, I guess, in general for a lot of people, but struggling with handling criticism. Again, like I said before, my wife, we may be having a conversation and my wife may be trying to help me be better at something. But if I'm just offhand offended by everything she says in her trying to, even if she's not saying it right, or we have to work through what she's actually trying to say, If you can't handle criticism and I'm always flying off at the handle, I'm always getting angry, I'm cutting her off and not letting her speak, that's low emotional intelligence. Insensitive to the feelings of others, or you make insensitive remarks all the time. One thing I've had to learn through in life is that I have a degree of sarcasm that exists within me. And it's not trying to hurt people's feelings, but sarcasm seems to have a way of hurting people's feelings. I was just raised in such a way where I point out the dumb thing you just did by using sarcasm, or the thing that didn't make any sense by using sarcasm. And I find myself having to catch myself because I'll tell my kids, like, oh, you thought that was a good thing to do, huh? And of course they did. That's why they did it. They're 8, 6, and 2. You know what I'm saying? So, but when you tell an adult something like that, oh, you just thought that was the right thing to do. It just sounds that becomes a, you know what I mean? That's not what you want to do. So as you grow, you kind of want to be able to be sensitive to people's feelings and not necessarily live in a world of sarcasm. Unless you're a comedian, maybe it helps with your jokes, but you don't want to be sarcastic all the time with people. Inability to adapt to change, poor communication in relationships, and difficulty managing anger. These are some signs of low emotional intelligence. Any comments, questions about that, please?
John, this is me, Sean, and I just wanted to add, when you talked about as adults, sometimes sarcasm, well, as children, sometimes they don't understand sarcasm, but sometimes adults don't understand sarcasm. And early on in our marriage, Pastor Rawls would use this phrase, do what you want, just do what you want to do. And over the years, we had to discuss what do what you want to do means, because I took it literally. I did what I wanted to do, but that's not really what he meant.
Yeah. I'm guilty because I just recently, and me and my wife are going on 12 years this year, but my do what you want to do is usually followed up because you're going to do it anyway. And so that doesn't help at all. But even if I didn't finish it up with the do because you're going to do it anyway, that was kind of the, when I've said do what you want to do, because I was like, you grown and you smart, you got a PhD and you the boss and you know everything anyway, so go ahead and do what you do. But that wasn't the best way, the best way to handle that. So we from the same WhatsApp group, as they say. We understand.
Y'all might be cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Working on it. Lord, ain't finished with me yet. Anything else for that? Okay. So recognizing high emotion and having high emotional intelligence. These are kind of some signs here. So again, the opposite of kind of what we talked about, strong self-awareness. Again, you're not always going to get everything right all the time, but being able to be like, hey man, I'm really frustrated. Or if you're not frustrated, you're really disappointed. And that's a good, I think oftentimes like having language, like a lot of things I do with clients, especially kids, but even adults, we have this thing called an emotions wheel. And so everybody's go-to sometimes is I'm mad. But are you mad? Maybe you're not mad, maybe you're disappointed. Maybe somebody did something that really hurt your feelings, that really let you down. And it might manifest as anger and you being mad, but it's really like you really want to cry. Like you're really sad that that person didn't do what they said they were going to do. Or you plan a day where somebody's supposed to come help you clean up the community garden and nobody shows up and you the only one pulling the weeds, I'm speaking to myself. And so it's one of those things where you recognize it's like, yo, I don't have to have a nasty attitude when I see those people next time that didn't show up. It's more so like I could recognize that I was disappointed and it made me sad that nobody kept their word, but I can still go on. I can still live and I can still thrive regardless of how those I feel. Did somebody have something? Okay. And then
No, just agree.
I'm sorry. Okay. All
right. I get it. Yeah, just agree.
Okay. Yeah. And then having effective communication skills, being empathetic and considerate, being able to adapt to social situations, and then being able to build relationships is kind of one of those, kind of those things. So that's kind of it. I mean, the last 2 slides are just kind of wrapping up and reiterating what I already talked about, but time is up, I think. So I just wanted to throw the, questions and answering, or, seeing if anybody had any questions, or I can just kind of read through these last slides or whatever the case may be.
No, I think it's really, really good. And I think you could save, I was all through that right there. Especially with especially with the little sarcastic remarks and stuff like that. And so and I think it's just you gotta always know how to see how you can improve upon, you know, what it is that you're trying to do. And so if it's trying to be a husband, trying to be a dad, trying to be a pastor, just to improve upon it. And in the end, you know, try to be intelligent enough to first of all gain wisdom and then use that wisdom once you've gained it. So I think this is really good.
And again, I apologize. There's very practical steps and things that you can do to improve, but you know, it was just a lot to do in one day. But there is hope. Like Mrs. Ross said before, there you can develop emotional intelligence. It's not a stagnant state. You don't always have to be in a place where you're responding strongly or doing whatever, but you can definitely you can build upon it and improve it.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too, Dr. Parker.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
All right, all right, all right. I think we had sound like everybody enjoyed and benefited from the conversation this evening. So we want to thank you for presenting. Thank the mental health ministry for always coming up with a great discussion, and those that are watching. We know we always want you to share the posts and so that we can be a blessing to others with much needed information. And so, if all hearts are satisfied, may the grace of God be with you.
Pastor,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
like your format. I like your screen.
Oh, you like it? Yeah.
I like it, your screen.
Love it.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So hope to see you all tomorrow at our Real Talk Bible discussion. I don't have a topic that's been sent.
Finishing up. Don't worry about it.
Amen. I don't have a topic that's been sent to me yet. And so if you have a topic that you want to send, go ahead and email it to me or text it to me. And look forward to and that's in-house. Tomorrow is in-house, and so we'll have our Bible study plus dinner tomorrow. But God bless you all and have a great week.
Thank you, Pastor.
Night.
All right.
Night.